Hello there. This is Matt Kosick, Executive Director of Region 5 Services. Through this presentation, I plan to give you an overview of Region 5 Services, what we do, and where we are present day. Additionally, I plan to share the history of Region 5 Services and how community-based programs came to be in Nebraska. Last, I will share what your role is as a governing board member. Our mission statement, Region 5 Services, is to provide desired education and support to individuals with disabilities, promoting safety and respect while advocating for dignity and inclusion within the community. Our purpose is to help individuals with disabilities achieve their life goals. Everything that we do from an organizational standpoint is through the lens of that mission and purpose statement. The services that we offer can be broken down into three main categories: residential, vocational, and employment. Each of the services that we provide are based on an individual's needs. We operate several group homes throughout the region, which would be considered continuous residential settings. Additionally, if an individual wanted to live at home with their parents, or if they live independently, we can provide support in that case. Oftentimes, those cases are just a few hours of support per day or a few hours per week. Ultimately, we will meet the needs of the individual and provide whatever support they need. Shared living is a contractor relationship between Region 5 and an individual. We operate several day service centers throughout the region, and most of what we do is focused on finding meaningful employment for the individuals we support. A lot of the programs are set to provide skills, whether they're social skills or job skills, at each of our day service centers. Last, our employment services provide coaching, training, on-the-job, shadowing, really whatever the individual needs we can provide. Region 5 was established in 1973 as a political subdivision. We support just under 800 individuals here in southeast Nebraska, and we're made up of 796 employees. If you couldn't tell by the number of employees that we have, our annual budget of over $50 million shows that we are a very large organization. Our service area covers 16 counties in southeast Nebraska. Here is the map of our service delivery area. These 16 counties make up the original service delivery area that is Region 5. The best way to describe where we provide services is from the Platte River south to the Kansas-Nebraska border, and then from a line between York and Hebron to the Missouri River. We have 15 individual agencies within Region 5. 6 of which are within the Lincoln metro area. Additionally, we have smaller locations that are considered satellite offices. For example, our York agency has a satellite office in Seward. Total, we have 22 locations in southeast Nebraska. This map shows all of the actual towns where we have a location, whether it's an agency or a satellite office. Region 5 also has a foundation. Our foundation is a traditional 501c3 organization. The foundation was established in the early 90s with the primary purpose of supporting the work of Region 5 services. Our foundation owns several homes, vehicles, and locations that are in operation today. At Region 5, we pride ourselves in being one of the highest paying agency providers in Nebraska, as well as offering a very generous benefits package. Here shows just an overview of what we offer as an employer. Here is Region 5's organizational chart. Starting on top is our Regional Governing Board. Our governing board is made up of one county commissioner from each of the 16 counties in our service area. Additionally, we have a volunteer advisory committee that is made up of individuals with disabilities, parents and guardians of those with disabilities, and citizens. Both of these committees provide public oversight for our organization. I am our executive director. Each agency has an agency director, which report to me, but we'll talk a little bit about an agency on the next slide. Everything from this dotted line over is considered our central or corporate office. And we have a very small corporate structure. Each of these directors here within our central office provides supports through the whole region. Our quality assurance director provides regulatory and quality pieces throughout the region. Our director of organizational support ensures medication administration training and medically supported training. Our fiscal director, Kevin, ensures that our finances are in order and that we are making wise decisions with our purchasing. Our human resources director, Joanna, provides the voice of the people, providing policies for our staff. And then our director of behavioral support is a position we are currently recruiting for. All of these pieces make up our central office. An agency org chart looks something like this, starting with the agency director on top, working with 2 to 3 coordinators. These coordinators are the frontline supervisors who are scheduling staff, coordinating things with the individuals we support. They are the glue that help hold the region together. Some agencies have an assistant coordinator and they help out where needed. Some have receptionists and bookkeepers. Some agencies have employment consultants. These staff are working with the community and working to help secure jobs for those we support. Some agencies have medical services associates. These folks go with the individuals we support to doctor's appointments and advocate for their health while there. Last but certainly not least, community support professionals. These are the direct support workers. This grouping of CSPs makes up about 650 of our employees, so a very large contingent of the Region 5. So that is what Region 5 looks like today. Now I'll talk a little bit about the history of community-based programs. So looking back at the history of Nebraska, the century that ended in 1950, so the time before 1950, were really considered the dark ages for those with disabilities. There wasn't much in the way of service provision, there wasn't much in the way of laws that protected individuals with disabilities. And really, if you had a disability, you were considered a threat to society. It was so bad, the public perception, in fact, that in 1915, the state of Nebraska passed sterilization laws that required individuals who had mental retardation to be sterilized. This law stayed on the books for several years, and in fact, in 1930, state legislature passed another law that removed consent for individuals with disabilities. So oftentimes what had happened was if an individual was born with a disability, the doctor would suggest that you just send your son or daughter to the institution. And the only institution in Nebraska was the Beatrice State Home. The Beatrice State Home opened in 1885 and has had several different names through the years. The state home, the institution way of life, really was not a good, meaningful life for those with disabilities. And in fact, many of the studies found that all the care that was being given in the Beatrice State Home was custodial, meaning it was survival skills. How do you get by? How do you manage day to day just in the institution? Several families were separated through this time. So mom and dad would have a son or daughter with a disability. They would then go to the institution. Years would pass. Kids in the family, siblings would never know that they had a brother or sister. We have countless stories of families finding out that they had a brother or sister with a disability after they died, after they saw the obituary. But that wasn't uncommon. The humanization of the institution really stripped away the personality of individuals. In fact, as people passed away, as people died within the Beatrice State Home, their graves would just have a number on them, no name. So it really stripped the humanity away from the setting. So knowing this was the way of life, you could imagine that parents got very frustrated with this, and they started a movement. What started the first piece of good news for those with disabilities was in 1949. A very limited program started with schools. There were 7 schools across Nebraska with 211 students. Obviously very small, not as big as what was needed, but it was a start. Additionally, parents advocacy groups started. The Greater Omaha ARC started in 1951, and the Nebraska ARC started in 1954. These parent groups were essentially fueling the fire, starting the movement. They would actually start their own schools. So a couple of parents in a community would band together. They would hire their own tutor or own teacher, and then they would send their son or daughter to a school. COZAD started what they called an experimental school in 1958. That school is still around today, although it's really evolved through the years. So in the 60s, this decade for those with disabilities is really called the decade of out of the darkness. The parents' movement was gaining steam, and in the early 60s, they started to get the ear of the governor. And so the governor developed an interagency committee on mental retardation. This committee would meet regularly, would develop steps to find a way to improve the lives with those with disabilities. And through this, they devised an action plan to combat mental retardation. Meanwhile, the Beatrice State Home kept growing and kept getting worse. In 1968, the population of the Beatrice State Home was 2,300 residents, which was 3 times larger than its capacity of 800. The governor's ICMR determined that radical change was the only way to fix the Beatrice State Home, saying that zoos generally spend more money than the state of Nebraska spends caring for their vulnerable adults. News spread of the Beatrice State Home to the media. Lee Terry Sr., who was a popular anchor at the time from KETV Channel 7 in Omaha, decided to do an expose. He spent a day down in Beatrice and created the documentary called Out of the Darkness. This premiered in October of 1968 on the news in Omaha, and because Omaha was a repeater station, this news story was seen all throughout Nebraska over the span of a week. Because of this, the top was blown off on how folks with disabilities were treated, and as a result, action started to occur. In 1969, the next year, Nebraska legislature passed 14 laws that provided for the creation, funding, and coordination of community-based programs throughout the state. They decentralized services and developed a funding model that was going to be split between the state of Nebraska and local agencies. They created 6 service delivery regions, which are still in existence today. Region 1 is the Panhandle of Nebraska. Region 2 is Western Nebraska, with North Platte being their home base. Region 3 is Central Nebraska. Region 4 is North and Northeast Nebraska. They operate as North Star. You are all hopefully familiar with Region 5. And last, Region 6, which are the 5 counties around the Omaha metro area. So Nebraska legislature continued to act, passing 30 additional bills between 1971 and 1975. However, the most consequential thing that happened for those with disabilities in Nebraska was this lawsuit, Horacek versus Exxon. So Sarah Horacek is actually still being supported by Region 5 services today. Jim Exxon was the governor at the time, and Sarah Horacek at the time was in the Beatrice State Home. What the lawsuit alleged was that those who were in the institution, those in the Beatrice State Home, were not given the same rights and benefits that those who were outside of the institution were given. And so as a result of this lawsuit, a settlement was decreed. The settlement gave some very basic framework for what we still use today. Starting with the first bullet point, mentally retarded citizens have the same constitutional rights as all other citizens. It's crazy to me that this piece has to be printed, but at the time that was not established. So pretty consequential items that were developed as a result of this lawsuit. Additionally, folks with disabilities would receive habilitative care and be free from harm in the setting which is least restrictive of their personal liberty. This statement is still being used today, as it is common for the work and the supports that we provide. Additionally, this lawsuit provided that the Beatrice State Home be scaled down, be fixed, and that community-based programs become the top placement priority. Additionally, it determined that an assessment and team evaluation would be done to determine what was best for the individual. It really put the individual at the core or the priority of everything that we were doing instead of the other way around. As a result of this, Nebraska was viewed as a leader. Our community-based model became the best practice. So instead of being shunned from society, those with disabilities were now included in the community, which was a huge thing for those that we support. Kind of one of the surprising aspects of this is that community-based programs are more cost efficient and cheaper than running an institution. So that was a positive thing. As far as Region 5 services goes, we had a few agencies that were started by parent groups in the late 60s. And it was only until the counties started working together with the state through the laws enacted of the late 60s, early 70s, before Region 5 could come to pass. So one of the first organizations that was started was LOMAR, the Lincoln Office of Mental Retardation. They started in 1969. Saunders County in Wahoo started in 71. Southeast Nebraska started in 1972. And Odo County Office of Mental Retardation in Nebraska City started in 1974. All of these institutions were, or all of these agencies were started by parents groups. In 1974, the county commissioners from each of the 16 counties in our service area signed the Interlocal Cooperation Act, which joined together to provide comprehensive community-based services. As a result of this, our governing board was formed, and they required a provision that required an advisory committee to also serve to support the region. In 1975, Region 5 became a public entity. All of our assets and liabilities were assumed by the Region 5 governing board. At that time, services were only being provided in Saunders County, Odo County, Southeast Nebraska in Auburn, and Lincoln through LOMAR via a contract. As time went on, additional agencies began to open. In 1976, an office in Crete opened. In 1977, David City opened. In 1980, 16 individuals were sent from the Beatrice State Home to Fairbury, where Region 5 started an additional agency. In 95, our Lincoln program, the first Lincoln program started. So Lomar, the original office, went away in 92. And so with that void, Region 5 started to grow within Lincoln. In 1997, our York and Seward office opened. In 1998 and 2000, a third and fourth Lincoln program opened. In 2000, our Columbus office opened. In 2005, we acquired ServiceLink. ServiceLink is an agency here within Lincoln. In 2010, our fifth Lincoln program opened, which is actually our sixth Lincoln program, but we refer to it as Lincoln 5. In 2013, our Gretna office opened. In 2015, we opened an office in Bellevue. And finally, in 2016, we opened a standalone office in Beatrice. Funding-wise, so in the early days, there was very little funding set up. Money was sent from the general fund in most cases up until 1987 when Medicaid funds started to be employed. But all of these were basically similar to a block grant in that a set amount of money was allocated for our services from the state, and they would basically say, here's your money, provide services to as many people as possible. This wasn't ideal. This created a lot of confusion because we would say we were at our limit in funding. Parents wouldn't understand. And so it wasn't until the early 90s when individual intervention hours became the way it is now. And what this means is that all of our funding is based on the individual needs. Assessments are done to determine the level of supports that are needed for the individuals we support, and then funding is derived from that. It is a 50-50 split between Medicaid, federal money, and state general funds. It's not exactly 50-50, but it's it's close to that. Because state general funds are used, we are at the mercy of Nebraska state legislature. So they essentially determine their rates. We as a business, we as an organization do not determine the rates for the services we provide. We are essentially set rates by legislature within their budget, and then we determine how we provide funding from that point forward. Because we are a public entity, one of the original service delivery regions, we do get county funds. So it constitutes of about 0.5% of all of our revenue is money from the counties within our region, which is a holdover from that interlocal act that was set way back in the mid-70s. So as a governing board member, here is what is expected of you in your role. First off, we meet 7 times per year. More importantly, your role is to provide public oversight. It really helps us as an organization. We're kind of one of the leading advocates in our provider community because we are one of the original service delivery regions. It provides more credibility to what we're saying and the services we provide, but it truly does help to have elected officials on our governing board. So you are essentially providing a credible public oversight to our organization. Meetings aren't going to be too controversial in general. Mostly what you'll be doing is approving procedural matters. So any sort of employment policy that we have and any sort of policy with regards to those we support that's changed, we will bring that in front of the governing board and share that with you for your approval. Additionally, you will review our financial performance and approve that. We will present those results with you each time we meet. And last, if there's any major initiatives, major changes, or major purchases that we intend on doing, those are the items that we will bring for you for approval. Now, everything that is on the governing board agenda has already been reviewed by the advisory committee. So that committee, as well as you and the governing board work together, both working, providing oversight for our organization. So as a governing board member, here are some of the things that you should keep an eye out for. Number one, fraud. We are a public agency and we utilize public funds. Everything we do should be above board and there should be no fraud within our organization. Number two, ethics. Is what we're doing ethical? Are we providing those that we support the best ethically safe environment? And last, is it reasonable? If I worked for this organization, would I find this move or this change reasonable? I include this in here because the reality is, with us being such a large organization, there's going to be changes in policies that we make that aren't going to please everyone. But by and large, do the things that we promote, are the things that we are suggesting, are they reasonable? Is the question you should ask yourself. A few more things. As a governing board member, do not do the work. Myself, my staff, we're all paid to do the work. It is not something that we would ask of you to do the work that we are supposed to do. Your role is to trust me and my staff. Trust me that I have all the right people and the right experts in place to do a good job for those that we support. Don't get in the weeds. What this means is when we do governing board meetings, we are going to keep a very high level of detail. If we provided you with every last detail, we would have 2-day long meetings, and that's just not efficient for your time. So we will keep a high level 30,000 foot view of the organization, give you enough information that you have that you can be able to make good decisions. Your oversight is crucial and appreciated to me. You know, you are in each community and you know what's best for your community. So I'm grateful to any guidance you can provide to help build bridges within your community. Think in terms of how this would affect you. So if you had a son or daughter that had a disability that we supported, or if you worked for Region 5, how would you feel about these policies? How would you feel about the general direction of our organization? And if you're comfortable with that, that means we're doing our jobs well. Last, I spent a lot of time talking about the history of those with disabilities and how our services came to be. It's critical that you are an advocate. Your voice is much louder than those who have disabilities in our communities. We still see discrimination to this day. It's critical that you are an advocate. It just ensuring that the best interests of those with disabilities are kept in priority. I was asked the question of how to be an advocate. So number one, know the history, know what we do at Region 5. That helps us tremendously. But also, if you have connections with business owners in your community, encourage them to hire folks with disabilities. There's nothing that is more meaningful to someone who has a disability than having a gainfully employed position in the community. That's the best and easiest way to provide community inclusion. So that is all. Thank you for listening to the overview of Region 5 services, and thank you for serving on the governing board.